Hi everyone, and this is Pamela from Animal Justice Emergency, and today we're going to be talking about the COP and change and the Animal Cafe. So it's quite a lot to say. So I went to the COP March in my city last weekend, and one of the reasons I hadn't posted some videos for a while was because it was involving so much time to actually organise for the COP. I had a table at the local city's march, and I was giving out tons and tons and tons and tons of leaflets, but also going on a previous march, on a student march, and an opportunity came up there to speak with a BAME group online. I was invited to speak at that. And generally, there's been an awful lot of sort of toing and froing, so that's one of the reasons I hadn't been able to post videos. It's been an interesting experience, and I think one of the learnings was like what an enormous amount of time actual real life organizing takes, especially when it's unstructured. So that was fine, but also it was incredibly productive in terms of meeting different groups of people and trying to raising the sort of like question of animal activism with them. And again, coming up against the usual sort of, glazed eye syndrome, which was a bit, surprising and yet not surprising at the same time. And we're talking about groups like, XR, Youth Strikers, Socialist Workers' Party. I mean, there was just a sort of like, the usual sort of like glazed eye thing. But the thing is, having actually made contacts with these entities, these people who are trying to sort of create change, I think these are opportunities that can be built on. So that's one of the things that I'm going to be doing with moving forward into the future with the Climate Cafe and other things. I met various representatives from different community hubs, which was also very interesting, as well as local vegans. And I have to say, giving out the leaflets at the COP March was a really great experience because I got rid of loads and loads and loads. And people, because they were in that kind of open activist mode, they were very accepting of giving out and taking not just animal justice emergency flyers, but also I was giving out the animal aid flyers about climate breakdown and the role of using other animals in that. And there was a very receptive feel. It was also nice to meet vegans on the ground who came up to the table. It was a really windy, rainy day. So there was a lot of covering up things with plastic, and my banner was completely bent because I lashed it to a tree, or rather, a vegan bloke lashed it to a tree, but hey ho. And then my feelings that people are not that bothered about actual personal change really were heightened, and kind of it made sense when I came across this piece in the Guardian on Sunday's Guardian, and it said, it's a survey, few willing to change lifestyle to save the planet, climate survey finds. So it says citizens are alarmed by the climate crisis, but most believe they are already doing more to preserve the planet than anyone else, including the government, and few are willing to make significant lifestyle changes, an international survey has found. And the countries surveyed included the US, UK, France, and Germany. And I think this, again, in a way, it's quite validating of everybody seems to be sort of thinking, well, hey, yeah, I'm doing enough. I don't need to even contemplate, going vegan or plant-based, or, stopping using my car because I'm doing so much. I can't really figure it out. I want to explore these, what people think they're actually doing more. But 62% of people apparently saw that the climate crisis is the main environmental challenge the world was now facing, which is good. But when asked to rate their individual action against others, such as governments, businesses, and media, people generally saw themselves as much more committed to the environment than others in their local community or any institution. And I think, people that I met actually at the COP March, for various sort of like well-known environmental organisations, again, there'd be a very, at best, lukewarm attitude towards the flyers, the vegan flyers and stickers. And one bloke from, I think it was Greenpeace, said that he was into sort of like veganism, but if his colleague was there, he would have cleared away the vegan stickers that I was giving out. Anyway, so again, 76% of those surveyed across the 10 countries said they would accept strict environmental rules and regulations, but almost half, 46, felt that there was no real need for them to change their personal habits. And again, I think this is quite validating in a way, because we all know, as vegan animal rights activists, animal liberationists, we know how difficult it is to try and encourage people to take on board any kind of change. So it's not just us. I think, encouraging people or creating change is like a massive, massive thing. And as I said, I do feel quite validated by this survey, although it's not really what I would call good news, but I think it gives you something to think about and maybe something to work on. So then what could the solutions be? Well, again, I think this really made me think that the whole Animals Cafe, which I'll give you an update on, project, potentially has a really strong role in helping create change, for all the reasons that I've gone into before. So having the climate change framing, so then hopefully people will be, at least ideologically on board with the notion of something needs to happen, with a strong, very strong vegan, animal rights, animal liberation message in the context of this cafe, which can be a community hub. So where are we now? Well, I finally, actually, amazingly, managed to speak to a cook. Hooray! And we're going to be meeting next week, which is also great. She also does food for some sort of like homeless project. So she's kind of like fairly committed, and she has a job as well. But I feel like I'm sort of made some progress there. I'm also meeting somebody else from a community hub, an actual paid organizer, who hopefully will be able to give me some hints and tips about, and maybe even some contacts about all the sort of like structural elements of organizing these pop-up cafes. The timing update is that they're going to be January and February, because the potential venue in a park not a million miles away from me is being upgraded and renovated, and that's not going to happen until, well, it's not going to be finished until January or February 2022, which is good because I'm inundated with stuff. So what else? I think the communications is really key. And I've been thinking about this a lot as well. Oh, yes. And also, obviously, if it ties in, if we manage to get the first pop-up in January, then we could link that with Veganuary, which again has got a very high profile, obviously, because of sort of like the whole consumerism, and it's pushed by, well, it's funded by a multimillionaire, but it would be an excellent hook for this kind of work, because again, for all the reasons that I don't particularly sort of like buy into, consumerism, popularist, etc., stuff in the shops, these are reasons that actually the ordinary member of the public, it will make it more accessible to them. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, who knows. So it's still a lot, it feels like an awful lot of work to do. People say, I mentioned to somebody, one of the climate activists, she said, and the first thing she said was, oh yes, that's a lot of work. And I think it is a lot of work. So that's, as I said, really why there have been a bit of a gap in the YouTube production sort of side of things. Grumpy Vegan Grandad says, what do you think about the animal agriculture not being mentioned in the COP26 talks? Well, in one sense, thank you, it's horrendous, but in another sense, it's really not unexpected, because I've been looking at a lot of the stuff that was put out prior to that. There was been months of stuff about about the COP, that I've been looking through, and there was a huge gap in terms of mentioning animal agriculture. And this was from the NGO side, not even from the COP side, the non-governmental organizations, the, as it were, alternative COP, which was, and if they're not mentioning it, you can guarantee 100% that it's going to be on no one's agenda. Now, one of the things I did find really interesting was there was a lot of stuff about corporate sponsorship of the COP, including the major oil companies, but not just that major oil companies like JBS, the Brazilian billionaire animal agriculture and Amazonian destroying entity. They were also sponsoring, so they were also represented at the COP, and they would have had huge numbers of people lobbying. I mean, what I'm thinking about the COP is that it's this COP is really just, it's a circus, as it were. It's just a fantasy that things are going to be made all right. Even before they were coming out with their nonsense, it was clear to me that we as activists, in whatever realm we're activists in, need to just forget about the whole sort of like governmental side, because they're not going to do anything this, to help us, to help the planet, to help the animals. This whole concept of like net zero, that doesn't mean that they're cutting emissions. That means that you have things like carbon offsets. So you're still allowed to pollute, you're still allowed to put carbon dioxide, methane, etc. into the air. But then you sort of like plant a few trees somewhere, or have some sort of like fantasy technology, carbon capture and storage or whatever, that supposedly makes it all right. So you can basically keep on making the emissions. So I think this is a signal for us as activists to ramp up our organising game, and for vegans to perhaps be less shy about, you always get this thing, oh, we don't want to frighten people. I've had a few people say this to me, I'm talking about the Climate Cafe. Oh, we don't want to frighten people. Well, according to this survey, people are not frightened. People are basically quite smug. They're aware of the situation, but they're quite smug about it all. So I think people need to be given a bit more of a robust, well, this is, the solution that we are proposing, which is, supported by huge amounts of research. And of course, it's morally right, is to stop eating other animals, stop using other animals, take on the reality that other animals we are animals, they are animals, they've got their own reason to be here. And I know it's a difficult one to get across to people sometimes, and sometimes I find it really, really difficult, even the thought of engaging with people again. But what else can we do? The animals are dying anyway. The animals, not just the animals that are taken for food, the animals, the wild animals, the free living animals, they're being killed by their billions. That's my cat, Liz. Hi, Liz. They're being killed by their billions. So as vegans, what do? All I can say is I'm committed to getting this cafe started. I'm committed to continuing the work, and appreciation and validation to everybody else who is doing that work. And let's try together to step up our game. Thanks for your question, Grumpy Vegan Grandad. Liz says thank you too. This is Pamela, Animal Justice Emergency. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you want to. You take care.